This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified. UFO classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Friday, my friends. I hope you are nice and warm. It is snowing quite hard here in Utah. I've been out plowing the walks a couple times today. It's absolutely beautiful, and one of those nights that I will definitely be staying in and grabbing a cup of hot cocoa and doing more research after the show and listening to KCOR. Who am I kidding? We've got to have that. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, all of my friends in chat every week. Tim, Libertas, Northern UFOs, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to get in there and to support the show. It means a lot to me for you to be there. I have an exciting guest on tonight who has just released a new book, and I'm going to be introducing him in a moment. But first, I want to, with a very, very heavy heart, talk about the passing of one of my dear friends in this field. Craig Lang was a certified hypnotherapist with the National Guild of Hypnotists and owner of Explore with Hypnosis. He was located in Minneapolis. He worked with Kathleen Marden on the Experiencer research team, published articles in the MUFON Journal, QFOS, International UFO Reporter, The Edge. He was author of 2 UFO books, The Cosmic Bridge, Close Encounters and Human Destiny, and The Other Side of the Sky, The Cosmic Bridge Companion. He's done so much, but I want to just remember him a little bit because there are very few people who I've come in contact with in my life who have touched me like Craig. The first time I met him was at a MUFON symposium back in Pennsylvania, and from that moment forward, I truly knew that we were going to be dear friends. And now I can't say it's for the rest of our lives. His life is continuing on in a different place, but I know that he will still always be with me in some way and those he loved. He was always there for me when I needed to call him to bounce ideas off of, and he was a big supporter of mine, and he brought me back to speak for MUFON a few months ago, and I know that was a feat because I've been so vocal about MUFON, but it was absolutely an amazing time. I most recently hung out with him at ECETI Ranch. We were there gazing at the night sky, looking through our night vision, we went up and researched the garage door, this garage door that apparently appeared, which actually really didn't, but that's another story. I've got pictures on my Facebook with him, and I am really happy to report that during that trip, he actually saw a red amber sphere, a UFO, and it was something, he's pretty grounded. It was something that really blew his mind. I'm truly devastated. It's been a hard week for me to get over this. Lots of tears, lots of hoping that everybody that was with him at the MUFON symposium has gone if they've been to the doctor, that they are safe and sound. Please, if you are ill at all and you were there, I would please recommend going to seek medical help. Craig died of a very contagious type of pneumonia, and I just am, like I said, I'm heartbroken, but I hope you remember him. I hope that you take some time to learn about him and to read his work, and I just will say, Craig, I will miss you very, very dearly. This is really hard for me. So on that note, I'm going to bring on somebody that is going to make me really happy because he is such a cool guy. He is an author, illustrator, ultralight camper, and a really cool guy, plus a UFO researcher. His writing is so eloquent. I love to hear him speak as well. He is an avid outdoorsman. He loves to write extensively and study the subject of alien abductions, like my friend Craig, synchronicities and owls. It was his firsthand experiences with these elusive events that really created the foundation for his research. You can find him on his website, Hidden Experience, and explore the connections. He has also authored 2 incredible books. The newest book I would recommend you getting. I've read some of it, and it is amazing. It's called Stories from the Messengers, Owls, UFOs, and Deeper Reality. My friend, my guest, Mike Clelland, is with me tonight. So, Mike, how are you? We haven't talked for a while.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm
I'm sorry about your friend, and I know a lot of people who knew him. So I'd never had the chance to meet him. So, but I know a lot of people who spoke highly of him.
Well, thank you for that. It is a big loss, and it's one of those things you just you know how it is. I know have lots of relationships that you formed through all of this work, and some people you meet and they just touch your lives.
Yep. Yeah. This is not a subject to be taken lightly. It's not a light subject. Let me put it that way. It tends to be heavy, and people get very involved, and tends to be, for the most part, really big-hearted folks migrate into this realm.
They do, and that's really beautiful. Sometimes it's easy to get kind of tied down in the negativity and it's just a few people, really, but a majority of the people are all in this, like we are, looking for answers, trying to find any sort of truth to this. And it really is, I think, for me and for you, I'll speak for you. You could tell me if I'm wrong, but this is the whole process of learning about this is such a beautiful experience. And I've learned so much about many other aspects of life, not just UFOs.
Well, I've certainly learned aspects about other parts of life, that's for sure. Literally to the point where I no longer look at the fabric of reality in the same way. Though, it certainly can be challenging. It can be scary. And so, it's a wide range of emotions that swirl around this.
And so, you have the 2 books, and you are the owl guy.
I'm happy to be the owl guy. If I'm going to be, that's. Yes, some people get known for other things, and I'm very content to be called the owl guy. I don't know if I've got a third owl book in me, but let me tell you, 2 is so when you total it all up, it's about 650 pages, a little over 650 pages of owls. You gang the 2 books together, and that's a lot of owl talk. And I don't know if I want to go any. I could certainly do a nice blog post, and I love collecting the stories, and I love hearing the stories, and I feel like I'm a good resource for these stories. But yikes, that's. I feel like I said a lot in those 2 books.
Well, and I have to just say again that you are very eloquent with the way you describe things, and it's just my mind has no problem going there and visualizing these things, and it's really beautiful.
Well, I worked with an editor in the second book, Suzanne Chancellor, and we worked very hard together and scrutinized every comma and everything, and really had it out on when to use speak or spoken, and so it was and she was incredibly helpful, and it was like I kind of realized that this is, so the second book is people's personal accounts, really doesn't stray much from personal accounts. And I felt it was really important to treat these stories with as much integrity as I could put into it. I didn't want anything that smacked of sensationalism. And I didn't want it to be like just a knockoff book, right? So, I had one book out there, I might as well crank out another one. I did not want that. I really wanted this one to stand on its own. It has a different feel than the first book. They're wonderful companion books, but I think they both stand on their own, and they both, so they're saying the same thing in a different way. So they both the conclusion at the end of each of these books is the same. The route into it is different, I guess. The route into addressing the question of why owls is different.
And I have to say, I loved Whitley Strieber's introduction.
Yeah, that was a big deal for me. I kind of was like, Whitley was extremely helpful in the first book. And, because I would email him and I would, because you trace it back, and I've tried. I mean, the owl in the early part of Communion, which was published in 1987, which is, 4131. Someone's got to do the math for me. It's hard for me to do the math. And so it's, so it'd be 31 years ago. Yeah. So 31 years ago, that was the first place in popular culture where owls were directly connected to the UFO contact experience. I am certain there's other examples out there. I haven't found them. I've found other examples in like science fiction movies from the 1950s, but that's something else. That happened, I think, just out of the ether. Yeah. And so they show up in the context of and that's pretty elusive. It's not like there's nothing concrete there, but I mean, it's something I pay attention to. He was very wonderful about like responding to me and answering my emails and being extremely patient with me. And he made it was funny. He kind of was like, when the book came out, he was like, well, didn't I send those emails like 3 years ago? And I was like, yes, but I'm not you. I can't write as fast as you. So like, this is, so I had, it took a long time to put that first book together.
Well, I mean, any good book, anything worth reading, it takes a long time and a lot of thought to put together. And it is really interesting. You mentioned Communion, of course. I think everybody in this field, if you haven't read Communion, you probably might want to do that. But that was, I will never forget reading that when I was back, in high school. And so I should not date myself like that. But I still have one of the little pins from the book that I had, and I wish I had the original book, but it was it really was an impactful book.
Yeah. I mean, and so there's a lot of things that I, especially in pop culture, I think the owl references for instance, in Twin Peaks, people are always like, what does the owls in Twin Peaks mean? I actually can't answer that. The script writers have been very cagey and about where they get their inspirations. They're not speaking up about their inspirations much. But the owl issue was already in Communion just a few years before the initial run of Twin Peaks back whenever that was, like 91, 92. And in that, that was the way the line, the owls are more than they seem. So that line comes from Twin Peaks, and that I think ties directly back to Communion.
And that's interesting that the producers or anybody involved with that have been cagey. That's too bad.
Well, they're pretty tight-lipped. I mean, they're trying to, if they gave away all their, like here's their inspiration for this and that, it's meant to be an elusive, kind of mysterious, open-ended, what would you call it? Like, the drama is meant to be very elusive and hard to pin down. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I think it would make it more exciting to learn about, to add these things together.
Who knows what the future will bring? Someone may come out with a cheat sheet, so.
Oh, that would be good. But I have a question in chat, and this is a loaded question. Of course, I would not expect anything less from Libertas, but he wants to know what is the significance of owls?
That takes 650 pages to and you still don't get an answer after 650 pages. So the honest answer, my best answer, is I don't know. So I do not know, why. You asked the question, why owls? And the simple answer is I don't know. But I have sort of swam in these waters enough that I can kind of dance around the question and kind of come to a point where and I'm actually cheating right now. I've got the book open, the second book open. There are 4 answers, and each of these answers has a follow-up question. So the first answer is the one I've always gone to. It's my first go-to answer. Why owls? And I would say owls are alarm clocks. At the simplest level, they are here to wake us up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then the next question is, wake us up to what? Right. And then that gets then you're then it's just as murky all over again when you wake us up to what. But so owls as alarm clocks, so many stories. If you take a step back and listen to the story, my personal story, owls, that's straight up my thought. Owls were alarm clocks. It was there to wake me up. Owls showed up in my life in 2006, right at the point when I started looking into my own experiences. Right before I started looking into my own experiences. I would not have looked into my own experiences had not the owls sort of, came crashing down into my life. So the other one, which is a little more, what would you say? You could go to the philosophy department of a college and sort of, argue this one. But owls are archetypes. And the owls are an archetype. They are a symbol, like an image stored within our genetic memory bank. Like there's a hidden meaning for owls, but we all share it within our grand unconsciousness, like as if the owl is the key, and there's some door in our unconscious that it can unlock. When you go down that road, in my opinion, so when I went down that road and started to sort of speculate, maybe it's archetypes. Every puzzle piece in the puzzle, sort of clicked together. Like all of a sudden, all the puzzle pieces were snapping together with this tidy, perfect click. So there is no way I can prove that owls are an archetype, and that's the reason they're appearing here. But it fits so beautifully. And another one is that. And this is similar to alarm clock, right? So you kind of got alarm. So they are here to announce initiation, right? So like a young initiate, like someone who's, and I would say the shamanic initiation. Shamanism plays a big role in this. I've talked to a lot of shamans and a lot of people who've gone through shamanic training and read a lot about it. And the owls show up at the time of the initiation, at the time of their so there's a point in a ritual, right, where let's say, so where the initiate starts as one thing, and then at the end of the ritual, whether that's around sitting in the teepee with the elders, or whether that's kneeling in front of the Eucharist at communion. The initiate, the one participating in the ritual, is changed, right? It's metaphoric, right? So, in my opinion, the drinking a little wine and eating a wafer at communion doesn't change the person, except metaphorically. Now, it depends who you talk to. A true believer would say, yes, you are changed by going through that ritual. So if they're announcing initiation, then the question is, an initiation into what? And this is something, now the fourth one is owls would be a totem of the transformational experience. I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to, and it plays out in the book, where the experience of the owl, and oftentimes in conjunction with UFO, owls will lead up to a UFO sighting, or they'll have an owl's experience, and then that'll be at a transformative time in their life. And this is going, obviously people see owls all the time. There's plenty of owls. There's owls out there. People see owls. When these events are highly charged, the stories can be highly charged. So the owl would be the totem of the transformational process. And I also say that for instance, in the book, there's a woman, her name is Laura Bruno. And I found her. It's so funny. She found me. I found her. We went and looked at our things from years ago. We had exchanged emails, but never responded. She sent me an email to me roughly the same time I sent an email to her, and we never got back to each other. But we did finally connect, and she has a wonderful story. Well, so this is a transformational story. She was dealing with a head injury, a terrible head trauma. She had been in a car accident, and her life was on one trajectory. And she was going to go back to school to study English literature. She was going to be a professor in English literature. And then there was this voice in her head that says, don't go that. You can't do that. You need to be a healer. And she says, no, I'm going to be a I'm going to go back to school. She got in a car accident, and the brain damage and the trauma, the initial trauma, she's healed up completely, was so severe that she lost her ability to read. So she was forced by just the inability itself to do something, to actually to change a path in her life. So while she was healing, while she had terrible migraines, she was doing very poorly, she stayed at her parents' house. She said every day her parents would go to work. She'd sit on the back porch. It was summertime. This owl, full daylight, would sit with her on a branch near her. And then there was a day on a weekend when her mom sat there, and her mom was like, "There's an owl in that tree." And she said, "It's there every day." And it's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" The mom says. And there's a wonderful line. She said, because I thought I dreamed it, this owl.
Oh.
So she goes through a transformational process. She is not an English literature professor. She is a healer, an intuitive, a Reiki therapist. She's doing very, very deep psychic work as a psychic healer, as an intuitive healer. And okay, I got way sidetracked as far as the reasons, why owls. But if it's a totem, if the owl is a totem of the transformational experience, I would also add, owls are not a light totem, right? Owls are not a light symbol. They're not simple. They are the sign of something challenging. If an owl makes an appearance in a symbolic way, not like whatever, you saw an owl off the side of the driveway one day. That happens to people all the time. If it shows up at a highly charged moment, this is not an easy totem. It doesn't make it bad, but from my experience and from the experience of people I talk to, tends to be a totem of a profound life challenge. So,
isn't that interesting? Wow. And
I've been drinking coffee. I got a cup of coffee in me, so I feel like I'm on a good roll here.
I like your roll. This is great. I mean, but that is very profound that you would say that. That this really does talk. I mean, and everything you read, everything I've read with regard to your work. I mean, this is seen in a very transformational time, a challenging time. And I think when we start having UFO experiences, or all of these things are challenging. So it's also curious, and I've got to just ask. We've got like 2 minutes to break, but the chat room is on fire again, which I really appreciate. But Scott had a question, and I will ask you that really quickly. He wants to know if you see the owl as an imaging, as some sort of like an induced vision.
Like is it like a visionary experience sometimes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a lot of people who say, like, there's a wonderful story in the first book of a woman who lies in bed and opens her eyes and looks out the window, and there's an owl on a branch, and then a laser beam comes down from the sky, a blue beam, shoots out the owl's third eye, zoom, and hits her third eye lying in bed through the window. And the way she describes it is so trippy, and it does not sound like she's interacting with a real owl.
We're going to finish that right when we get back. I'm Erica Lukes, here with Mike Clelland. We are going to take a break, so catch us on the other side.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Join the hosts of the American Ghost Hunter Show each week as they shoot from the hip without holding back.
They're kind of unpredictable, not like the rest of us.
Live every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come hear some of the hottest authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world on the American Ghost Hunter Show.
Our survival depends upon it.
Hauntings, UFOs, cryptids, cryptos. If it's branded paranormal, we'll be talking about it. The American Ghost Hunter Show. Live Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The only question you have to ask yourself, are you ready for it?
Yeah! All right!
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
The Fenton Files, where it's all connected.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Come explore a universe full of possibilities. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. The Fenton Files. Go where no other show has gone before.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there.
Whether it be UFOs, aliens, conspiracies, or even consciousness, your host, Lorian Fenton, has a file for that. The Fenton Files. Fenton Files. Your journey to the truth is but a file away. Live, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The Fenton Files.
Incredibly intense.
Where truth is just waiting to be discovered.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1-hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone, and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes. Always happy to spend my Friday evening with my friends from all over the world and to get into chat and see everyone there. My usual crew, I love it. It really means a lot to me. And please make sure that you spread the word about the show. I am open to suggestions for topics, for guests. I love your input, and you are why I'm truly doing this. I want to give a shout out and my heartfelt thanks to Northern UFOs, who has done a wonderful job getting all of the radio shows on YouTube. Thank you so much for doing that. You are a love. And I also want to just express my condolences to all of Craig Lang's friends and family and give them my love. They are all in my thoughts and my prayers. And my guest this evening is someone who has had incredible life experiences, profound, deep, perplexing, and that pushed him on a path, like many of us, to learn as much as he could. He is an author, illustrator, ultralight camper, and of course, a UFO researcher. He has spoken at many different events. He has 2 books with regard to owls. His new book is called Stories from the Messengers, Owls, UFOs, and a Deeper Reality. Mike Clelland is my guest tonight. And so thank you. And when we had left off, we were just finishing Scott's question about the imaging. And is there anything else that you wanted to add about that?
I can just say yes. I have plenty of accounts where owls show up very visionary. They seem like someone's seeing an apparition or something. Yeah, and I take dreams into account too. I certainly talk about owl dreams. I treat those. I try to weight everything equally, right? Whether it's a dream, whether it's an owl sighting, whether it's a UFO sighting, whether it's a synchronicity. I try not to weight one more than the other. Obviously, a structured craft landing in the backyard has a little bit of oomph to it, but I try not to. So here's what I try to do. I try to treat owls, synchronicities, and UFOs as all the same thing. I mean, do they have the same? They're obviously not the same thing, but I'm treating them the same as far as they all have the similar impact on people's lives. I've certainly met a lot of people who said, I had an owl experience that changed my life.
And, I just have to tell you that something I was last year, probably to the day, I was at a sacred Native American site in Arizona, and we were there doing a little bit of research. It's out in the middle of nowhere, absolutely stunning. And I was walking around with a couple of colleagues, and we noticed somebody who was just sitting on top of the mesa. And we were all, because we're out there by ourselves, and we see him, and this person is very, very clearly watching us. And so we were, okay, what's this guy doing? So we kept walking, and then we eventually walked up towards him, and I, of course, went over to him and gave him the third degree. Wanted to find out who he was, but we had a conversation, I'm just here and da-da-da, but then I ran into him. I was off wandering by myself, and I ran into him again, and he said that he was there because he and his wife had very profound experiences, and he was camping at this site, this Native American site, just outside. He was there, and he saw a big owl, a 4-foot tall owl.
Well, so we'll get back to that. Keep going.
Okay, no, but it was to have this synchronicity, where they're doing research, and to have him out of nowhere. I mean, it was so random for him to talk about these things, and he ended up, I told him a little bit about myself, and he just said, "You're meant to be doing what you're doing," and it was a really profound and interesting and almost shocking exchange. But to be out in the middle of this beautiful site and to have him talk about his experience and having to do with this 4-foot owl it was incredible.
Okay, so just as back to the visionary experience, there's no such thing as a 4-foot tall owl. There's no such thing as a 3-foot tall owl. You can get a 2-foot tall owl, but let me tell you, that is a big owl, and there ain't many of them. So if someone says, I saw a 2-foot tall owl, I can kind of go, okay, I'm going to give you that one. But anything beyond 2 feet and a couple inches, we're talking something else.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's describing is something that simply can't be true. Maybe he's misperceiving it and it was a little far away or something like that. But usually so if someone says they saw a 4-foot tall owl, they saw something else. So we're back to that visionary experience. So now the one thought is it's a screen memory. And I suspect anyone who's listening is kind of up to speed on these things. And a screen memory would be a projection. No one really knows what it is, but the agreed upon definition within the research community is that a screen memory would be a projection put into the mind of the observer by, let's just say, the UFO occupant, the gray alien with the big black eyes and the bald head. Most specifically, would put the image of an owl, a 4-foot tall owl, in. So when you looked at it, you wouldn't say, "Oh my God, there's this skinny gray alien standing out there in the backyard." You would look in the backyard and say, "Well, there's a very tall owl, 4-foot tall owl in the backyard. How odd!" Or on the side of the road, or So that's a little less. We have at least compartmentalized that. We have a little. We wouldn't freak out seeing a big owl.
I wish I could have picked his brain a little bit longer, but it sounded like he and his wife were compelled to really study the Native American traditions and went around to some of these different sites and had some pretty intense experiences like this. But it was, and he felt whatever he saw was the owl, as he describes it, was a guardian of this site.
That's, I mean, sure. I mean, so that's his interpretation. That's his sense, and you gotta trust that. You gotta follow that, and you gotta take that seriously. Whether he's correct or what it may or may not be is hard to know, but that's the implication he came away with. So yeah, I've often said, like, I listen carefully to people's descriptions of their experiences. I listen carefully to their experiences. And then I take a step back when they say what they believe about what it means, right? Those are two different things. One is but I think they're both very important. So you have to take in both of them. What the people believe, and then what they say they saw. Believe in the sense that they're he felt it was a guardian. Where did he get that thought? Yeah,
and then that's a great point, and that's an important point, that you have to really separate those two, because if you don't, that can influence your own research.
Well, I think we're all influencing our own research. Everyone's totally biased, and if you say you're not, you're kidding yourself. So yeah. I mean, I'm like the worst. I'm the worst because I'm like, I filter out everything if it doesn't have an owl in it, right? So that's like that's all I'm concerned about is the owl research.
All right.
Right. So there's like, a UFO report comes into my desk. I'm like, there's no owl in this. I just I'm not gonna I brush that aside and don't even open it up. Yeah. So
send it to me.
I know, yeah. So if you have an owl thing, send it to me. So
absolutely. And I noticed in the book you have a chapter about crop circles and orbs, and of course, with me and my love of orbs, spheres, that of course perked me right up.
That I opened that chapter. That chapter is told so briefly, just fleetingly in the first book, and it actually says at the bottom of it. There was a bunch of them when I was working with Richard Dolan, the editor. We were like, "Oh crap, I can't tell this whole story. The story goes on and on and on and on and on. It just never ends." So that was the thought. The second book would be a place to tell those stories. But tell the stories that it broke my heart I couldn't tell them in their completeness in the first book. So I had a handful, and then a whole bunch more arrived, in the time after finishing the first book, The Messengers. And one of the stories was this with Bert Jansen and Heather Tchaikovsky, and husband and wife. And so the one story is Bert's. So I love this story. Bert was in. He's Dutch, and this is in the late 90s, and he had been studying crop circles for 3 summers in a row, right? Going to Wiltshire County in southern England specifically to immerse himself in the study of crop circles. And the 3rd summer came along, and it was kind of the end of the summer, and he's like, I've had enough. I'm done. Standing in the field having this thought, I'm done. What am I going to learn? I've been here for 3 years. What new? What could I learn that's new? And at that moment, a little orange orb appears in the other end of the farmer's field. And it's sunset, and this little orb is kind of floating around and zipping around and growing big like a big beach ball, and then shrinking down to the size of a grapefruit and zipping around. And he's shocked. And he watches this thing, and there's a shed at the other end of the field. And this little orange orb goes zipping across the field, and it goes behind the shed, and he waits for it to come out the other side. But nothing happens. Nothing comes out the other side. So he's like, what happened? Maybe it's in the shed. So he goes up to the shed, and he goes around the back, and right where the up high, right in the spot where the orange orb zipped by, is a broken window. It's funny. He's Dutch, so he speaks he said, could it be that the owl could have gone into the shed? So he went up to the front of the shed, and he put his ear on the door, and he hears this eerie hissing noises. Hiss, hiss. And he's like, I'll come back tomorrow. So he comes back tomorrow in the full daylight, and he walks up to the shed, and he puts his ear up to the door, and he hears this hiss, this creepy, eerie hissing noise. And I give him so much credit. He broke the lock and went in the shed. And there was a loft. And he climbs this ladder and he goes up to the loft and peeks up there. And there's a family of barn owls. Now, barn owls are the ones that look most like aliens. They are the white ones with the eerie heart-shaped faces. And baby barn owls make the creepiest noise. You just Google baby barn owl creepy noise. It's unsettling. So his thought was, what had happened? I followed an orb and found owls. So now I'm going to say, do you know Maria Wheatley, right?
I do, and thanks to you, I actually contacted her and met with her when I was over in England.
Good. I'm going to tell a Maria Wheatley story. These two stories go hand in hand here. So Maria Wheatley, she studies ancient megalithic sites and ancient sites all over the world, but most specifically in the British Isles. And she also studies crop circles, which I think is wonderful because her name is Wheat Lay, and crop circles appear on ley lines.
Right. Yes.
And so her name is Wheat Lay. I love that.
I do too.
Yeah. So she certainly studies ley lines okay. She has a story. She's going for a hike. There was a friend she had. It was sunset, and they're like, "Well, let's hike this trail." So they park the car and they go on the trail and they just get a little bit down the trail, hardly any distance at all. And this owl whoosh, flies right across them, bisects the trail, crosses their path right in front of them. A white owl. They look at each other and they said, we can't go any farther. They felt the same thing. We cannot go any farther. Our way is blocked. We're being told not to cross that line. So they turned around and kind of said, well, what are we going to do? Oh, let's walk up this hill. So there's this wonderful hill, and I think it's called Oliver's Castle. It doesn't mean there's a castle on top of it, but that's some of the hilltops in England have that name. So they hike to this hilltop, and they get this beautiful view of the sunset. As they're up there, they look off in the distance, and there's this bright orange orb. And it's floating towards them, and then it grows, and it shrinks, and finally it grows to the size of this huge, giant cigar. Like a cigar-shaped translucent. It wasn't truly a craft in any meaningful way, but it was big and cigar shaped, and then it's gone. It vanishes, shrinks back down, poof, gone. And they are both freaked out. They run back to the car. She says he could not get the keys in his car to unlock the door. He was shaking so badly. They both said that their psychic abilities had been boosted. They leveled down eventually, but they both said for the next few weeks their psychic abilities had been amped up. So here we have two stories. Bert has a story of following an orange orb and finding an owl. Maria has a story of seeing an owl and finding an orange orb. That chapter goes on and on and on, where both Bert and his wife Heather have an amazing experience. This is the problem. This is what I was wrestling with in that first book. You talk to, and you've run into this too, I'm certain. You talk to someone who's had experiences, and you kind of say, "Oh, well, then this happened, and this happened," and then all of a sudden, 6 hours is going by, and they're like, "Oh, well, here's the really weird stuff," and then they tell you the stuff and so it just goes. And these stories are complex, and they loop around, and they have this kind of crazy logic where they'll spin back in on themselves, and people just tell about standing synchronicities. And this is what was very difficult to get across in the first book, that these are real people having these experiences. And oftentimes these people are kind of shell-shocked. Well, these people are struggling. That's a better way to put it. People are struggling with their experiences, and because everything society tells us says this cannot be so, except these people are dealing with these things. And that's what I wanted to try to share and articulate. And I would say, this is my life. I have this loopy logic that defines my outlying UFO owl experiences. And it loops around, and it goes around the block, and then it loops back in on itself. And I'm a little more grounded now, and I would say that the writing process of these books brought me to that place. But these books have been therapy for me, and I'm a much calmer person having come out the other end of writing these two books. And I was not that same person now going back 5 years ago when I started this process. I was struggling with this stuff. This was not easy for me. Simply because I was told this is how reality works. Society has a very clear definition of what reality is, and what I was experiencing was outside the boundaries of that definition. And that's what I had experienced, and that's what I wanted to try to define and share through stories in the second book.
And isn't that wonderful? And all of this is really a healing process. I mean, it's explorative. I mean, we just learned so much, but it's like therapy. Like, and I feel my radio shows are the same way. It's like I work through things and learn things, and it just is. It does make you a better person, and that's interesting that you say it's made you calmer.
I don't know whether I'm a better person, but I'm certainly calmer. So, but yes,
well, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, I mean, I hope I'm a better person. Maybe I am. I'm not sure, but I'm certainly calmer. Yes, I feel like I'm a calmer person than I would have been 5 years ago. I know that. I'm not mincing words. I'm not pulling that out of the air. That is a truism.
So, do you mind, because some of my listeners are probably not familiar with your story, and if you would mind just giving us a little bit of background on what happened to you personally to get you into this line of study.
I kind of said, you got 6 hours? How would you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, we could do part 1, 2.
No. I'm 55 years old. When I was 12 years old, I'm going to have to be. I don't want to be flippant here, but to tell this story completely would take all night and into tomorrow. But I had a handful of experiences in my youth. And I had always just kind of pushed them away, like, who would have thunk? And they were missing time. They were seeing close-up UFOs. They were seeing, well, not quite my youth. In my 30s, I saw 5 gray beings in my backyard. Woke up, sat up in bed, looked out the window. There were 5 gray beings walking towards the house. They were backlit by this bright light. And I looked out the window. Now, everything should have said, like, lock the doors, grab a baseball bat, call the police. And I heard a voice in my head that said, oh, yes, they're here. Now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down. And that's exactly what I did. And I've since heard that many, many times in other people's experiences. Now, so I had that experience. I managed to push, and I was reading UFO books, right? I pushed all of that stuff. I was not going to go there. I was not going to deal with it. I was not going to address it. No way. And in 2006, I went camping with a friend. Sun was setting, moon was rising. She started talking about God, her deepest definition of God. And in that moment, an owl flew over. And then a second owl. And then a third owl. And we laid down under the stars. We didn't have shelter. It was a beautiful night in the Rockies. I was living right near Yellowstone National Park. I was in Grand Teton National Park, or near it, actually, when this happened. And just sleeping out under the stars, and owls would fly above us, and they would swoop down right in front of us and blot out the stars for just 1 second. It was so powerful. And a couple days later, it's like, that was pretty cool, right? You see owls. Wow, that was cool. We were both like on fire. Yeah, owls. And then a couple days later, so let's go camping. Let's do one night. Let's do it again. So we went to a totally different spot. At sunset, we watched the sunset. As the sun's going down, this owl lands near us on a branch. Another owl flies around us, and a third owl lands at our feet. And before, they kind of were off in the distance, right? They weren't swooping too low. This time they were, I don't want to say close enough to touch, but just about out of arm's reach. To have it happen once was pretty cool. To have it happen twice, I don't want to swear, freaked me out. It was like, it was not a peaceful thing to have it happen twice. It was cool. I mean, I was blown away. But in the aftermath of that, I didn't know what was going on. So something I talk about it now. I wrote about it in the book. I talk about it now. But I did not mention it then. Both times when those owls were flying around, there was a voice, a a inner knowing that said, this has something to do with the UFOs. I'm looking at owls. I'm hearing a voice in my head that says, this has something to do with the UFOs. So that's when I started looking into my own experiences. And I will tell you, the floodgates opened. I had so many synchronicities, so many weird owl experiences, so many sightings between 2006 and around 2011, really. It was out of hand. I was not doing well. It was a very shaky chapter of my life. And because I was just being bombarded with this stuff. So in that time, I started a blog. I started researching the UFO stuff. I started researching myself. I started documenting all of my experiences as best I could and putting them online, which is kind of weird, right? So I was it was like a real-time diary of my experiences online. And I was like getting owl story. And so the question I would ask people, I was merciless. I was seeking out Leo Sprinkle and Bud Hopkins and Dave Jacobs and Barbara Lamb, and I was finding these people and talking to them, and everyone I talked to, whether they were experiencers or people who have doing the research, I would ask the question, have you had any experiences with owls? And I was blown away by the pattern that showed up. People were saying, like, oh, that's funny. No one has ever asked me that. But yes, I have this really weird experience with owls. So you're from Utah. Do you know Ron Johnson?
I do know Ron Johnson. Yeah, so we're getting ready to go to a break because I want to talk to you. I think this would be great. I have not spoken with him in a little over a year, but what a fascinating guy. So we'll talk about that.
It's just a bottomless pit. It goes on and on and on and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely staggering. In fact, I've got some photos that he gave me of his puncture marks after his abduction experiences. So we'll talk about that and owls and much more. I am here with Mike Clelland. We are going to take a break. You can find his book, Stories from the Messengers, Owls, UFOs, and Deeper Reality on Amazon. So make sure you get it. It is a fantastic read. We will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Friday. I hope you are all snuggled up. I know I am because it is snowing like a fiend outside. I think it's going to be a lovely evening listening to good radio and reading more research. As always, I just can't seem to stay away from this. My research is taking a pretty fascinating turn, and hopefully I will elaborate on that when I can. But anyway, thank you all for being here. My guest this evening is is a brilliant author, very eloquent, and to hear him speak, and even today tonight on the radio show, it's just the way he has of talking about things and creating these. Oh, well, what kind of coffee you're drinking? Because it's not working for me.
Cheney's heart, yeah. So.
That's awesome. I got to use that line. But we've talked about so much, and there's so much more to talk about. And you've just written your new book, which is, from what I have read, that you sent me so kindly. I mean, it is it's beautiful. It's incredible. I love the fact that you go places that a lot of these nuts and bolts researchers don't want to go. And I think that's important because many times
the nuts and bolts researchers don't want to go to talking owls.
No, not so much talking owls. If they can't, it's just some things, as you know, I mean, are just too far out there. And I think, unfortunately,
there's a story in the book where a shaman from Africa claims to have eaten a gray alien. So I'll leave it at that. So,
well, that sounds like that's a good one. But I mean, it's, good for you. I've had, Greg Bishop is a friend of mine, and we've had lots of talks about things and how to research, and the fact that, so many times we are throwing out specific data, because we want it to go down, because we're looking for, we want to fit things into boxes, and they don't.
Look at me, I'm the worst.
Okay, well, I mean, I know you talked about throwing the other reports away that have nothing to do with owls, but at least you are open-minded enough to understand that there are other things that deserve to be looked at, and I think that's great.
The way I say it is, you have to take your shaman hat off. Excuse me, let me start all over again. You have to take your UFO investigator hat off, and you have to put your shaman hat on. Right? You have to take I can't remember. There's a couple examples. So Bert Jansen, right? I told you he was out in the fields, and he had said, "I've been looking at crop circles for 3 years. I'm done. What more could I learn?" And then he sees an orange orb. Now, the question I ask people, which I think should be, I don't know if it's in the files of a MUFON investigator, if they have do you ask a sighting person, what were you thinking in the moments leading up to your UFO sighting?
I do, because I think that's very important. It's all very relevant.
I know. So he was thinking, what more could I learn about crop circles? Right. And he sees an orange orb. I'm finding that question, and then the follow-up question would be, how has your life changed afterwards? So this is, sometimes people say, nope, my life's just the same. Nope, wasn't thinking of anything unusual beforehand. So, this is, but it's a question I ask because I'm interested.
And I that's good. I mean, I love that. I really like the place that you take your research. It's important. And I have to ask you, because you have a friend, we have a dear friend in common, and you've spent time with him, but Chris Bledsoe, who's been on the show, and he did the show about 1.5 years ago, and he hasn't done any shows. I'm not sure if he's done a show since then, because of all of the things that are going on now with, disclosure or whatever we want to call it. But tell us about your Chris Bledsoe experience.
So Chris is in the first book. There's a few points within the first book where his stories show up. He has a wonderful story. Well, it's actually, I met his father. I was at his home, and I met his father, and about 1 year after I met his father passed away. And at the funeral, the whole family was in the limousine, and it was pouring down rain, and they were leaving the cemetery, and there was an owl on a branch, and it was on the one branch that everyone in the car could have seen it, right? If it was any farther away, they wouldn't have seen it. If on a different branch, they wouldn't have seen it. Everyone in the car saw it, and they all felt the same thing. That was Grandpa. That was his dad. That was a sign. They all felt it. So that's their, they saw an owl. They felt that it was profound. And it was very soothing, from my understanding, to see this. And he was shaken up by it, but actually there's a solace there. Now, this guy's got owl stories. They just go on and on. But so here's one, right? So if Chris Bledsoe this is so typical of the kind of person he is, right? So someone calls him up and said they had a big windstorm, and a big tree kind of fell into his friend's house, and it was kind of teetering at this funny angle, and they had to chop the tree down, right? It was crashed over and leaning against the house. So how do you take the tree down? So he's like, it's way, way, way big, tall tree, 2-story house. So he gets up there, and he's the guy who does it, which is totally typical. So he would be the guy that climbed up on the roof with a big aluminum ladder, and he's take the peak of the roof, right, the very tippy top of the roof. And there's all these people down helping him, and they're trying to cut this tree down. And so he's at the very tip because they couldn't cut the tree down because it would have smashed the house. So what they had to do is cut the top of the tree off and let that part fall away top part wouldn't smash into the house. So he gets on the ladder and he leans it up against this tree. And he climbs the ladder. So here's the peak of the roof. The tree's off to the side of the roof, and he's climbing up the ladder. The ladder is on the peak of the roof, and he's going to chop this thing down. It's got a chainsaw. So like everyone's on the ground, like, okay, how does this? He's like, okay, let me think this. And then he gets up to the top, and just at the top of the ladder, an owl lands right on the branch, right in front of him. And when he told me this story, he was like, oh my word, the hairs on, he like showed me his arm, the hair standing up on my arm. And everyone was like, oh my goodness. Like everyone felt the same exact thing. Like, you get off that ladder, you climb down, you do not cut that tree branch there. So he climbs down, they have a big powwow, they sit around, they say, okay, we're going to tie the ladder off this way, we're going to tie the tree off this way, we're going to tie the chainsaw here, so everything, they rethought everything. And when he climbed up and cut off the top of the tree, the ladder was now tied to the tree, so that when he cut off the top of the tree, which was he's planning to do, the tree itself kind of surged and rose upwards a little bit. So the ladder, which was now tied to the tree, like lifted up off the roof, and so all of a sudden the ladder's hanging by a rope, and he's holding onto the ladder. And if that hadn't all been tied together, he would have fallen from a 3-story height, because he was at the top of the ladder at the top of a 2-story building. So let's wind Chris Bledsoe. Who's Chris Bledsoe? Chris Bledsoe has had some of the most profound, powerful, symbolic, frightening. I mean, the depth of his experiences, his UFO contact experiences, are unimaginable, and they all started around 2007. I think that's when his January of 2007 event happened. And he'd had other things before then. He was shot as a 9-year-old boy, either 9 or 10, and with a shotgun, and died. And they revived him in the hospital. So he had a near-death experience, and he had owl experiences as a youth. And so, how do you factor this in? This is a guy like climbing a ladder to help someone out, and an owl shows up. Everyone felt the same thing. Get off that ladder. But this didn't happen to just anyone. It happened to a UFO experiencer. So how do you back engineer like what took place there? I don't have an answer.
That's incredible. And this is, like you said, this is just one of many experiences that Chris has had like this. I mean, it's incredible.
Many, yes. And some of them are documented pretty well in the first book. Yeah.
And that's wonderful, because I think, we need his case, and he is such an important person in all of this. And I think a lot of times people who don't really understand what's happened to him can be a little critical, and that's unfortunate.
Like people that work for an organization that has a 5-letter acronym?
I have, yes, exactly. They were absolutely terrible. In fact, I have done a couple shows on that, which is good, because that needs to be, that stuff like that can't happen. And
so
I'm speaking. Really
I'm speaking for Christopher, who has told me the story. He was mad. He was not so much mad, but you could tell his heart sank. That's a better way to say it. And that he was treated very poorly, in my opinion. This is my opinion from what he shared with me. He's not the kind of guy that lies or exaggerates.
No.
He was treated poorly, very poorly, by MUFON. And I'll leave it at that.
Yes, and exactly. And I have done, I actually had one of the initial investigators, Norm Gagnon, on my show, and I really like him a lot, but he talked a lot about that and the fact that MUFON really really dropped the ball. And so I think that was good. And I know that Chris was listening to that show, and he felt he was very happy that was talked about and things. And I think that's important. I think, unfortunately, we tend not to treat people that are brave enough to come forward with experiences in a very kind way. And I don't think that's good. That certainly doesn't, I don't know what the end game was, especially with his case. I know that his particular case, most of it, good majority of it, disappeared from the CMS database. So that was
similar to, which I don't know what that means. Like, what? Come on! Stuff just doesn't disappear. It went somewhere. So in that,
yes,
I'm completely speculating, and I'm kind of being a little purposely provocative. But
yeah, it is. It's quite curious. In fact, I spoke to somebody today who mentioned another case of theirs that, the same type of thing happened, which is curious and very intriguing, to say the least. But I have Amy, who wants me to ask a question, because she is talking about a case that you have referenced before about a gray 4-foot owl that shape shifts into a gray.
Yes. This is a wonderful story, and this is a story that was her. There's a woman. She has a pen named Lucretia Hart. And her website is at Spiral's End. Boy, you want to get lost and go down the rabbit hole. Spend a week digging through that site, at Spiral's End. And her pen name is Lucretia Hart. She's had a lot of experiences. I interviewed her on my site. That's a wonderful interview. She talks fast, so there's a lot. We cram a lot in 2 hours of talk. She had a lot of experiences growing up, and she knew that she was having these contact experiences. She felt they were aliens, but they always happened at night. And she was working at a girls' camp. I think she was 19 years old. She was working at a summer camp for girls somewhere in the Northwest. And this was not like off deep in the woods. She was like between the spots, the buildings, and where the kids hang out and stuff. So she was walking a path between some buildings, and there was she could hear the kids in the background, the girls playing. And so she comes around this corner, and she's in this little open area, and she looks to her side, and there's a gray alien standing on the side of the path. And she's so wonderful at how she explains this. She said, so everyone who describes communication with these gray aliens describes their lips don't move. It's telepathic. And she knew that. And she was like, she looked at this thing. It looked at her. She totally caught it. Like, it didn't know she was coming around the corner. And it was looking at her, and she was looking at it. And she heard this, she said, this echoing telepathy. Echoing, boom, 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 back and forth, where she would hear it, and it knew it heard her, and she knew, and it was going owls, owls, owls. It was going owl, 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 owl. And she watched it morph into this gray being morph into a big, tall owl. And this thing turned around and ran off into the woods. She actually went back later, and she said it was very eerie the way it ran. It was like a hovercraft zipping across this field. And she went back later, and there was couldn't see it, but there was a big ditch in the field. And so it like hovercraft smooth, like across the field. And when she went on it, and if it had actually run on the ground, it would have had to have gone down this ditch and come up the other side. It would have only been a little bit, but she would have definitely seen it, and that's not what she saw. So this is like the implication is the owl, this has happened so many times. I can't tell you how many times I've written. I wanted to write UFO and I write owl, and I want to write alien and I write owl. It gets, so I'm doing it right now. I'm mixing up owl and alien like 3 times in this story. So the alien seemingly messed up. Like, it didn't have its little psychic mojo on, and it got caught. And that's that. I've got a couple of examples of that where people have said, like they get this oops, and whoosh, they've seen it change.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? And Amy also wants to know, with the sound, the owl, 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 was the voice mechanical?
You'd have to ask her, but she speaks about it, and you can look it up in her site. It's footnoted in the messengers. Her site is footnoted in the messengers, in where her story is told, and it's told fairly early on because it's in the screen memory chapter. And I cannot say whether it was mechanical, the sound, but she certainly was she's a wonderful writer, and she talked about this reverberating echo where it was bouncing back between her thoughts and its thoughts.
Oh, fascinating. Can you tell us about, because you said that you had a couple other stories like this. Can you tell us another one?
Well, this is from a researcher named Alan Cavanis, who's got a whole chapter in the book, but this doesn't have anything to do with this was used in woman who has been having UFO contact experiences, sitting in her living room. There's this bright flash outside. Like, what's the bright flash? And so she goes up, opens her front door, stands on the porch, looks around, and then looks right next to her on the porch. And then right next to the porch are 3 skinny gray aliens standing there. And they look at her, and she looks at them, and they got this like kind of, uh-oh. And then they start backing up, walking backwards. And then suddenly it's 3 deer walking backwards. And the description of the walking backward was very awkward and not deer-like at all. So they walked backwards, facing her. 3 deer walked backwards and walked around the side of the house. So this is, and I heard another story where someone walked into their kitchen and saw an alien there, and then whoosh, it turned into a giant cat, like 4-foot-tall cat sitting in her kitchen. Like that was supposed to calm her down, right? Like, it's like, I have a 4-foot-tall cat in my kitchen.
Well, might be a better option. I don't know.
It's probably cats are cuter than aliens. I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Wow. So I want to, because in the book you mention, you're talking about the hellhounds. And to me, you're relating this story that this woman had, and it reminded me of, even though, this is taking place, her story was taking place in England, it reminded me almost of what you would hear about in Utah with the skinwalker type figure. Do you think that there's any connection?
Well, I don't know, but my sense is sure. So that's the mystery to me, right? So there's all these outlying mysteries. There's these the hellhounds that show up. There's the strange stuff that happened at these places like Skinwalker Ranch. There's near-death experience. There's shamanic visions. There's UFO sightings. And so my sense is that there's this, and Ray Hernandez speaks to this, and I sort of have danced around this too, and he had a vision of this where he basically saw a giant Ferris wheel, and the core of this Ferris wheel was in the middle, right? And all these big, long, giant girders were stretching in there, and one girder said UFO contact, and another girder said shamanic initiation, another girder said meditation experiences, and they were all separate girders, but they were all connected to the central hub. And the hub was labeled consciousness. Now, that's his story, and it's beautiful. And he said he was basically making a left turn in traffic in Miami, Florida, and then like all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, whoosh, he's off in this netherworld. He's confronted with this amazing 3-dimensional, wildly symbolic, huge visionary experience with labels, like word labels on these big iron girders, and then whoosh, he's back in traffic, finishing the left turn. So that's a good as the explanation I have. What does it mean? Yeah. So there you go. I don't know. Consciousness is somehow cosmic consciousness, human consciousness, individual consciousness, Christ consciousness. I don't know, like some things connecting all these things together. That's, I feel confident. My strong sense is that the UFO stuff is a spoke on a wheel that's right next to the Bigfoot spoke. That's right next to the Loch Ness Monster spoke. That's right next to the psychic who can talk to dead people spoke. There's something going on, and they're all connected in this core realm somewhere. And that place might be in our heart. It might be in the Pleiades. It might be in behind the mirror. I have no idea, but my sense is that they're somehow connected.
And I feel that too. Obviously you can't since both of us have had pretty profound experiences. You can't. You have a UFO sighting. There's paranormal stuff taking place around you. I mean, it's so, all of it. And then you've got the synchronicities and just all of these things. It's just absolutely, it's never a dull moment. And you had mentioned that, you started writing, kind of journaling your experiences, and that's what I do. And I really honestly encourage people who are going through this to just journal everything you can. I mean, just even what you ate for breakfast. I mean, just anything that you can, and keep a diary of that, because when I go back and I look at things, it's like, even though that didn't seem relevant to me at the time, a light went on, to me, looking at it at a later point in time. And it's just such a great discovery process.
Yeah, that's the, I often I was blogging. So I was publicly doing my diary. Like, I was blogging real time. And one of the stories in this book comes from a blog post from 2009 at the height of my descent into madness. And Suzanne Chancellor, my editor, was she would take, now, do you want to use this word? I can't remember what I said, I was teetering on the edge of madness. It's like, isn't that a little strong? I'm like, nope, absolutely not. That is straight up, absolutely how I wrote it at the time. That is correct. I'm going to keep that line in there. And so, so that there's one essay in there, which is very personal of my own, where I wallow in that lost bunch of years. I mean, I'm not wallowing. That's the wrong way to say it. I'm articulating, my own experiences, and it was a rough time confronting those synchronicities, those mysteries, where I was confronted with a world that did not match the definition of reality that I had been taught.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? And I wanted to say we're going to break, but I want to say please go to check out Mike's blog if you haven't, hiddenexperience.blogspot.com, and both of his wonderful book stories, from The Messengers, Accounts of Owls, UFOs, and a Deeper Reality, and then The Messengers, which was the first book, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. They are incredible. They're available on his website and Amazon. I'm Erica Lukes. We will be right back. Stick around.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
Idiots. A Georgia man was busted for allegedly force-feeding a goat cocaine and whiskey. Do you believe that anybody would do that to an animal?
Well, he's trying to get his date kind of warmed up, isn't he?
Sergio Guzman, 28, horse trainer, was caught on camera holding a little guy's horn while a pal shoved drugs in its nostrils.
What was the point?
Why would you give an animal drugs?
Well, if it was a horse and you wanted to win the race,
but this was a goat.
That's my point. That's why I'm asking why.
Because they're sad, I
guess.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
In the shadows, a voice cries out. Evidence that you're not alone.
You said my name. What is your name?
Proof that the living and the dead coexist. Or do they? Every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, join writer, producer, and paranormal investigator Greg Bakken on Ghost Box Radio as he explores, interviews, and investigates evidence alongside some of the best in the paranormal community and beyond.
6 people killed.
Ghost Box Radio, Wednesday nights exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, because the dead don't sleep. Ghost Box Radio.
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light into Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific.
For Hyperspace.
The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride?
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the final segment. This always just breaks my heart that I don't get to talk all night long with fabulous people, but I don't, and I want to just thank all of you for tuning in. And we've got Yannick in the chat room, which I think is really cool, a new face. I appreciate it, and he's a friend of Mike's, and he is just saying that he worked with Ray Hernandez or met Ray, so this is really awesome. Ray has been on my show before. He's done pretty incredible work. When we left off, I'm with Mike Clelland. We were talking about your blogging experience and how you were really getting this out there and going through this time in a public sense to help you deal with things. But let's continue where we were at.
Where were we at? I can't remember now.
Well, I don't know.
I sort of just finished talking about one of the stories. Yeah. So
yeah.
at the break, I was talking about 2009 was a rough time. That shows up, which I'm glad I stuck that in the book. That story is a story with owls and UFOs that happened in 2009, and I was at a really shaky point in my life. Yeah. And I guess that one would go, oh my gosh, we'd take you'd have to have a longer show for me to tell that story.
Well, see, this is why we'll just have to have you back continually. Yeah. So prepare yourself for that.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So when on break, we were talking about Elaine Douglas, who I have to say, she was doing a lot of really, I think, incredible work here in Utah, and that's work that am trying to learn from or find out more about. And you had the privilege of talking with her when she was still alive and interviewing her. And you've got a really great interview that I've listened to. You've interviewed many top researchers, and I have to say that your interviews are incredible.
Well, those are therapy. That's part of the reason I haven't been doing any interviews lately, is partially I was writing the books. And then that was therapy, straight up, no questions asked. I was like, I needed help. I was seeking the help, and I figured, well, I can just interview them. So you're basically hearing in a way, Brad Steiger's the psychiatrist, and I'm lying on the couch, saying like, here's my problems. And that's the kind of the theme of some of that's a sort of an exaggeration, but, yeah, so those were for me. I was selfish in those interviews. I wanted those for my own peace of mind. Yeah, and Elaine was a tough cookie, boy. She was on fire with her passions and her opinions and stuff like that. She was not shy, and she was not loving light. So I thought it was great, because I think a lot of my interviews are kind of come off as kind of little sparkles and unicorns and stuff like that flying around, but not her. Boy, she had a totally different outlook on it, and I thought that was really important to. And she was a friend, and where I was living in southern Idaho at the time. It wasn't too far to get to where she was in Moab, and Moab's a beautiful place. She was living there, so I would travel through Moab. I always made a point to to visit her, and she would always have me over, and we would sit and drink coffee, and the conversation would just go on and on and on. I wish I had recorded these conversations. Here's just one thing she said. I have no way to. This is a story was told to me by Elaine Douglas. I want to find this document. UFO lands on the county line. Right, big glowing UFO gets reported. 2 cops from both counties zip in, and they pull up at the same time. The cops get out of the car and like, oh, that's a UFO there. That's a UFO there. And they never met each other. 2 cops, different counties. And they both realized they're UFO abductees. Right? She was like, this was staged. This was staged somehow to get these 2 together. There's a deeper subtext to this story. This story, this event, this UFO landing on the county line was staged to get these 2 UFO abductees in touch with each other. I mean, how does that happen? How does that, like, who's reading whose minds in the flying saucer to orchestrate that?
And that's incredible. And she had, honestly, some of the work that she has done with the interview, with some of the interviews that she's done, not only with you, but other people, and some of her files.
She did a series with Jerry Pippin, yeah.
Yeah, she was not love and light. She was feisty, and she had, I think, kind of a one-track mind when things went down in a certain direction. But I have to say that I value that feistiness, and for me trying to pick up the pieces in Utah, when I was in MUFON and trying to pick up the chapter that, people did not want to touch MUFON with a 10-foot pole because of what had happened with Elaine. That was, it was an incredible experience, and all I wanted to do and all I want to do is just learn what she was working on so I can take my work further. But I hope, and I hope someday I'll be able to have access to all of her information. But I'm glad that you had that interview with her.
Yeah, that was a fun interview, and she's tough, and she was. You could tell she had an agenda. Like, I didn't have to ask many questions on that. She knew right where she was going with this interview.
So who else in your career, in your research, who else have you met that has had a big impact on you?
Leo Sprinkle.
Oh gosh, he did one past life regression with me, and I would love to meet him at some point.
Wait a minute, how did you do that? Did you do it over the phone or something?
I called him up and I said, I would love to have a past life regression done. And so he did. He said, I don't want to know anything about you. And he sent me a tape in the mail a week later.
Oh, he was channeling. He did his kind of robot channeling voice. How was it?
It was pretty
I'm
intense.
Interviewing you.
It was very intense. Yeah, it was definitely. He was pretty right on some things, and it opened my eyes. I've never really divulged that information, but I will have to try to figure out how to get
the whole
that.
Show. Yeah,
I know. It was. He's such an interesting man, and he's a wealth of knowledge. So tell us about your experience with Leo.
Well, I was living in southern Idaho, and Leo was in Laramie, Wyoming, and I was like, I got to meet this guy. So I just drove there and met him, and just had an amazing chat with him. And so here's Leo. Leo is this big-hearted guy. He's like 6'3". He's skinny as a rail. He must be 80. I think he was probably. This was 10 years ago. He must have been 79 or so, and I think he's in his early 80s now. Or mid 80s, I guess. And I told him all these stories, and I was just struggling, and I can just remember that chapter and how I just couldn't get the stories out without saying I know this isn't true. I know this can't be real. So I told him all these stories, and at the end of it, kind of there's stuff, and there's people this stuff about alien abduction. Well, I don't think I'm an abductee. And he just slapped his leg and laughed right in my face. And it was the biggest, most heartfelt, loving laugh. And I was like, that was really important for me, that he just had listened to me for an hour. And I said, I do not think I'm an abductee. And he just laughed right in my face. And I don't think they teach that in like psychiatry school, but it was the perfect thing for me at that moment. And I respect him for doing that. And he didn't do it. It wasn't some sort of trick, you know, he wasn't manipulating on his part. It was real. It was a genuine laugh. So.
Oh, how wonderful. And I need to do this, you know, sooner than later. I need to just get my truck and drive over there and meet him, because he's.
Yep, you sure do.
I mean, how old is he now?
I bet she's 85.
Okay. Yep, probably sooner than later. That would be good. But he's such a wealth of knowledge, and he was so kind. And he sent me, after that, he sent me a whole bunch of information.
Oh, he writes and handwrites these letters. You know what he did? He read my book. And he sent a letter. He was a college professor for, 25, 30 years. And so I bet he was a tough professor. He did not so he kind of chewed me out in a letter for using the word abductee in the book. And I granted in the very early, that's right in the cover, the first book, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. He doesn't like that. He's a little more on the love and light side of things. And he said it should be, and he doesn't even like the term experiencer. He uses the term inductee, right? So you go into the Army, you're inducted into the Army. So these are inductees. So it's it's a very personalized, people all have their own little nuances on how they want to address this stuff. And I, very early on in the book, I use the word abductee. I use other words too. It's a crappy word. It's imperfect. It's got a lot of baggage, but it's the word we're stuck with. And then I just move on and use it for the rest of the book.
I like it. Well, and like for me, I mean, I don't like experiencer or, abductee. I mean, and it's interesting that you talk about, I don't really know.
We got to say something.
I know I don't. Because I think like for, you telling Dr. Sprinkle that you didn't think that you were any of those things. And
then he laughed in my face.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it was a wonderful laugh in my face. Yeah, I was glad he did it. It's a great memory. Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, I'm still I can't label myself anything. I don't know why. It's just.
Well, what do you write about? What do you label other people as? What would you call me?
Really cool.
Well, besides that, but I mean,
I don't know. I don't know if I would call you. I don't know. I guess I'm gonna have to meditate and perhaps pray a little bit later tonight on this.
I mean, you could call me an abductee, and then I would say, yes, that's the best word we have. It's inaccurate. It's got loads of baggage, but that's the word we're stuck with. Yes.
Well, maybe I will take an opinion poll and we can find a new name. I don't know.
Everyone's been trying to find a new name. I mean, that's what John Mack. That's what he came up with. Experience. The term experiencer came from John Mack to get away from the word abductee. Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
Well,
you know what I like is sometimes I use the word, which sounds great. It just has a nice little sort of. I like someone who's experienced. I'm mumbling my words here. Someone who has experienced direct contact. I think that's.
I like it.
That's 4 words, So.
Yeah. Hey, 4 words is better than 1.
Yeah.
I like that, though. Actually, I really do like that. So, we've got a few minutes before show close. And so just tell us, I want to know, just give us a little bit more about your book, about your new book. Just give us one more little tidbit.
Yeah. One more. Okay, so the point of the book is to have the longer, more complex, sort of loopy stories. The term I use in the first book is I say it's a paradox syndrome. These stories don't make sense. They were tough to write because they don't have a beginning, middle, and end the way a normal story does. They don't have a tidy ending like a normal story does. So this was a challenge to put these in the book. So there's 19 chapters, and some of them are short and some of them are kind of long, but all of them have an owl and a UFO somewhere as part of the narrative and an important part of the narrative. There was 2 years. So that was 2 years of my life went into this book, and Suzanne Chancellor, kind of held my hand as I struggled my way through it and kind of, slapped my hand a few times when I was, using verbs incorrectly and such. She was all about tense, like the tenses of things. And she would come down on me pretty hard when I didn't get the tenses right. I tried to have a lot of different stories in there. So here's something. So what came out of this book is that people who are having these experiences, not 100%. I mean, in the book, the 19 stories, and some of the stories are like three people. These people are healers. The number of Reiki healers in this book is like off the charts. It's not quite 100%. There's a few of them that are not Reiki healers, but their wife might be a Reiki healer or something. So this is something I've sort of stumbled onto, and I'm obviously, as I said before, self-editing, right? I'm not an objective researcher. I'm a subjective researcher, and I'm getting drawn down this very narrow path. And this is what I'm finding on this narrow path, where the owls are. I am finding healers, Reiki healers, shamans, therapists, intuitive healers. It's really. I did not expect it going into it, and that was sort of the surprise at the end when I had to write the conclusion. So there's something. I did not set out to write a Love and Light book, the first book. It's not really a Love and Light book, but it has a really pleasant kind of life-affirming vibe to it, and I recognize that, and that emerged from the stories. And I tried to put some dark stories in there too, because I recognized I was loading it in one way improperly. So I don't have an answer to the big grand mystery. I do know that the stories that are on my desk and that I am trying to put in these books have a vibe, a mood, a tone of something. Positive is hard to say because sometimes they're very hard experiences, life experiences, but they have a positive underlying vibe to them.
I like that. And I have to ask you before we close, when was the last experience that you had?
Well, I mean, a synchronicity. They happen to me all the time. I mean, on a light vibe like that would be a synchronicity like that. The big one was the event in 2013 when I had this is like the last 40 pages of the book, that event in 2013, the last 40 pages of the Blue Book, The Messengers, the first book, where I describe the events that took place all across southern Utah and all lined up on a map. So that would be, I haven't had much that can top that.
So you don't see anything? I mean, just anything?
I see owls. Oh God, I see owls all the time. They're out the window. I'm talking about owls, and I hear an owl hooting. Oh, so here's a good one. So, how much time do I have?
You have got 9 more minutes.
9 more minutes. Okay. A couple years ago, I was to speak at a conference in Maine. And I was going to be talking about owls, synchronicities, and the UFO abductee. The book was not out yet, was it? Yes, it was. The book was out. Now I'm drawing a complete blank. The Blue Book was out. And the Blue Book might not have been out at that point. I'm sorry. Now I'm struggling to remember exactly. But leading up to this, I wanted to tell a story about Suzanne Chancellor and her partner Jack. And they had been hearing, now these people are both experiencers. I say it straight up in the book. Suzanne has talked about it publicly. And they had been hearing this weird noise out their window. Now Jack did a little research and felt that they were hearing a baby raccoon. And there came a day, after about a year of hearing this noise many times a week, that Suzanne heard a site with like owl calls on it. She clicked on one owl call, and she immediately recognized the noise out their window was the sound of an eastern screech owl. And they make a funny little warbling whinny. They don't have a hoot like a normal, like you would think a great horned owl would make. Now, she was supposed to go to the conference. She ended up not going to the conference. I wanted to talk about her. I read a little note from her to the audience at the conference because she's had a lot of friends at this small conference in Portland, Maine. And I also wanted to tell this story that she had. So and there's more to the story. So she, at night, she's in the yard and she hears this whinny in a tree, and it's in her neighbor's yard, just the tree right across the into the neighbor's yard. So she says, I'm going to record this. Now I'm going to record this for Mike, for me. She's going to record this for me. She takes her phone and she's got it on record, and she walks over to the tree, and she gets up to the tree, and there's an orange flash, like an orange dot that appears in the tree, about the size of an orange, and then turns off. Totally silent. At that point, the owl stops hooting. I have this story several times. Something similar to this several times. So what was this orange dot? So basically an orange orb. That's your avenue of research. She hears an owl. She goes to the tree. She sees an orange orb. The owl stops hooting. Now, like, oh God, I got to tell this story. So then I say the best way to tell this story at a presentation is to put on the soundtrack of my PowerPoint thing, I'm going to put in an owl hooting. I'm going to get an Eastern Screech Owl sound effect offline, and I'm just going to, there's a way to drop an MP3, you drop it right into the PowerPoint presentation. I can play it, over the loudspeaker at the conference. It'll be great. Something goes wrong. I cannot figure out. I'm like, the conference is the next morning. I'm going to have to get in the car. It's late at night. I've got an 11-hour drive between where I am and the conference, and I gotta load this up, and I can't figure out how to do it. And I'm like, I could not figure out. So I'm like, screw it. I go to bed that night, and then in the morning, before the sun comes up, out my window, I hear the unmistakable sound, because I've been listening to it over and over again the night before. I hear the unmistakable sound of an Eastern Screech Owl. And Andrea, my partner, she says, was that an owl? And I'm like, yeah, that was an owl. And I open the windows and I stand and we listen for more and never hear it again. We both heard it. It was definitely, and I was like, well, crap. That means I've got to load this thing up. That's the message. It's delivering the message. You got to put this in your PowerPoint. So I struggled and I figured out a way to load it up on the PowerPoint. It's a hassle, but I figured it out. So in the presentation, it goes off great. I play this thing at the conference. There's a fellow there named Mike. Goes by the name of Mike C. He did not come up to me afterwards. But when I played that sound, he came up. I was there a year later. He came up to me a year later. Finally got the nerve up to come up and tell me this. When I played that sound of an Eastern Screech Owl, he just about fell out of his chair. It scared him terribly because that was the noise. He's an experiencer. He's at a conference for experiencers. That was the noise that he had been hearing coming out of his child's baby monitor in the baby's room.
Oh.
So now Mike C. is chapter 13 in the book. He gets his own chapter. And that was a tough one to write because it was just like I had to cut out so much. It was just went on and on. He has the same experience almost exactly of hearing the owl, looking at the bush, and seeing an orange orb. So to the script writers of reality, how did these details get dropped into place? I mean, this is a fantastic, this looping logic, right? So Suzanne's in the book, Mike C's in the book. How did they tell the same story? How does this happen? How does reality unfold in a way to present itself like this?
Oh, and that is so fascinating. And I really should have a show with both of you on. That would be a fascinating conversation. I've had Suzanne on. It's been a long, long time, but she has just fantastic experiences, and she's a really cool woman. I have to say, yeah. That's really amazing that she helped you with your book, and it's incredible. I highly encourage everyone to get the book, and which you can find on Amazon. So absolutely, this is one of my favorite reads.
I've turned my website and blog a little bit into a promotional. I've gotten, the book just came out. What is this? Today's Friday. It came out less than a week ago. So it's been out for 5 days, the second book. So it's a little bit, I'm working to promote it, and so there's a lot of, it's very easy to get. So let me just put it that way. You don't have to search very hard to find it. So.
Well, that's good. And I will be posting links, and I really appreciate it. And I've got one more question. I think we've got 2 minutes before show close, but when did owls become a fixture with your work for you?
When I was in the woods and I saw those owls and I heard the voice in my head that said, this has something to do with the UFOs. My life was absolutely derailed. The train fell off the track. And I was off wandering in some completely different direction. My life had been going one direction, and then that all abruptly changed.
Thank you. I love it. I love it. And I want to just say thank you, Mike, for being here. And please, go to Amazon, go to Hidden Experiences, blogspot.com, learn about Mike, get his books. This is such incredible work. Mike, thank you for being here. And I want to tell all of my listeners, I appreciate your support. Share the show. Thank you again, Northern UFOs, for doing all of your work on YouTube. And stick around for a wonderful night of very talented women on KCOR. It is going to be a great night. So we will catch you next Friday.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network.